Welcome to a new episode of Outside the Panels with your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes.
Welcome everyone to an episode of Outside the Panels. I'm your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes, and as you know, I like all sorts of different books that exist out there. Some, like superheroes, are easy to do. Some would argue with me on that one. Some like comedy and horror. Maybe not so much. This next genre, I have no idea why they get a Brit to talk about something that is so quintessentially American. It is, of course, the Wild Wild West. And with that comes creator Beau L'Amour. Beau, even tell me all about your project, sir.
Okay. Well, I had never done a graphic novel project before. This was the story was a story of my father's that was written back in the 1940s.
Wow.
And it was kind of written and forgotten very quickly. He wrote it actually in France just before he returned to the United States, right at the end of World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And I was published in a magazine, Dime Western.
Okay.
And then, was pretty much forgotten. It was eventually included in a book of short stories. And we, at Random House or Bantam Books in those days, we had a program of doing audio dramas, very much like old-time radio dramas. And we produced this story as one of those. And Catherine Nolan, who wrote that script, and I just kept thinking about the story and feeling like there was more to it and more we could explore. And eventually, I had intermittently worked in the film business. And I thought, well, what I'd really like to have is several film scripts that are ready to go. And it ended up that I did 3 of them. One I wrote with another fellow that was a very traditional Western. And then we wanted to have, then I did an adventure story, not a Western, that I did myself. And then I also wanted to have a kind of not traditional Western, kind of a more kind of indie style movie. And Kathy Nolan and I worked on Law of the Desert Born to create that script.
Cool.
It was never, the only one of the 3 that was ever made was the adventure story. And not having a chance to make it when Random House began exploring the possibility of doing a graphic novel, I went to work with Charles Santino to convert the movie script into a graphic novel script.
Cool. And this is where we're at now then, right?
And this is where we're at now then. It's a few years ago, but it was a really, really charmed experience. Terrific. I loved working with Charles Santino. Catherine Nolan and I had worked together for many, many years. Thomas Yates, who was the artist, was just amazing to work with. And my very good friend, our webmaster, our audio editor on a lot of the audio projects, Paul Odell, did a lot of the post work on it, kind of Photoshop type post on the project.
All right. So the book, The Law of the Desert Born, I might be a Brit, but when I was a wee child, I got into a series of books called Hawk. Jared Hawk, the guy that had the claw for a hand, and me and my brother used to eat this stuff up like nobody's business. It's like proper violent, kind of dingy, Western-y type stuff. I think that probably lasted about 5-6 books. There are several of them, of course. So what is it, do you think, about the popularity of the Western that still makes people think, ooh, I'm going to want to check that out?
Well, I think the theme that is at the fundamental of Westerns is the friction between civilization and the wilderness.
Right, that's a good
And
call. Like that.
a good Western generally has a bit of both.
Yeah.
And you can have that, you can even have that in kind of a gangster movie or something like that. The wilderness in that case is the wilderness of crime, the wilderness of
The city, the dark city, and the dark
exactly.
alleys. Yeah.
But the Western makes it very, very graphic and apparent where that difference is. I think a lot of times I'm not a big fan of people saying, "Oh, the great thing about a Western is, you've got your sort of good guys and your bad guys, your white hats and your black hats." But at the same time, when you move that civilization and the wilderness theme into, say, an urban setting, it does get harder to tell the difference. And so I think there's just something very primal about that, and it certainly can exist anywhere else. There's a terrific writer named Wilbur Smith who wrote a whole bunch of stories, very much like my dad's, about South Africa. And
My mom's favorite author, by the way.
Oh, there you go. And they're very much Westerns, but they don't exactly fit in the Western genre because they all take place in Africa.
Cool. Excellent. Right. We've talked about environs. We've talked about what makes a Western. Should we have a look at your trailer video? Should we have a look at this and see what happens?
That would be wonderful. Yeah.
Let's bring this up. There we go. Let's see how this works. So this is the trailer. And let's have a look and see and hear what this is about. Here we go, the trailer. A Lot of the Desert Born. Wow, how good does that look? I'm like, whoa, that's absolutely astounding. Whoa.
I have to give credit to Amy Myers, young lady who cut that and is actually a very fine artist. I mean, a fine artist, not someone who regularly does stuff like that, but she did a wonderful, wonderful job, she and her partner, putting that together for us.
Excellent. Was there any added pressure for you when you're creating this graphic novel? Because it's based on your father's work. Do you find now that you've got to kind of, I suppose, live up to those kind of expectations of his writing and how he saw the book and the story move across?
No, I don't really feel that ever. And, some of it also is because this story evolved quite a bit from the time it was a short story to an audio to a movie to a graphic novel. And so it had become something that was, I mean, it very much follows the lines of the story. If you were to kind of go through the story and highlight the various things that happen in it and the relationships between the characters, but it's much more fleshed out. The original short story was 10 or 12 pages.
Right.
And it,
so you like George Lucas going back and adding the special effects?
Yeah, something like that. Well, the other thing that's important about something like this is I always feel when you start into a project and you have kind of a producer role, one of your jobs is to make everyone, including yourself, live up to their best moments at every moment. So, you kind of spot the things that are working well, and then you try and elevate everything to the point where those better moments don't sort of stick out and look like, oh, here's the best possible peak of this whole thing. What you try and do is get it all into make it a functioning whole at that level. And luckily with this, unlike a lot of other projects I've worked on, films and sometimes audios and stuff like this, and literary projects of one kind or another, everybody was working at the top of their game, and we all really, really liked working with one another, and we were really good at getting in and covering for each other and helping each other out and everything. It was a terrific team.
Cool. Excellent. That's what you want. Comic books are super collaborative. We've talked about the environs. We've talked about the origins of the book. What's the story? Who's the characters? What's going on? What's the main risk? And why is there vengeance in the air?
Okay. So I'm going to go back and tell a little bit of history. When Catherine and I started discussing fleshing out the story, one of the conversations that we had was a story about the Lincoln County War. The Lincoln County War was the moment in New Mexico history where Billy the Kid made his name.
Oh, okay.
And you see it, and it takes place right in the same area of the country that this story takes place in. And it was also a place where my dad, as a young man, worked. So in the 1920s, he was a young man working harvests in the Pecos Valley, and he actually knew a bunch of people who had known Billy the Kid when they were young. And so he had been very close to that, to that event or the stories that generated from it before it became legend. And I thought, well, if we're going to talk, if we want to do a very realistic Western, if we want to do something that's very down to earth, I wanted to have a conversation with Catherine as we wrote this story, as we created the story, that, where I expressed, like, this is actually what the Lincoln County War was about. It was about dueling hardware stores. There was a hardware store in Lincoln County, and a group of people wanted to start another one. And the people who had the first one didn't want the pressure of that. And so they started trying to get court injunctions, and then there was name calling, and then there was kind of various kinds of small type harassment. And it spiraled and spiraled and spiraled until an enormous number of people in Lincoln County were shooting at each other. But it started with
nails.
Yeah, it started with the most mundane stuff. And so we said we wanted to start there. And so we had kind of a dispute about water rights that we worked with. And these two families that had been in the area for a reasonable amount of time, and how they were set against one another during a drought. And so the story starts with Shad Marone, who is the foreman of one of the ranches, riding up to the headquarters of the other ranch and murdering the man who lives there, and then taking off. And you then follow a sheriff's posse that is assembled to track him down, and they end up taking with them this man Lopez, who is sells himself as a tracker, and he is a Mexican Apache, although he's part Mexican, part Apache, although he kind of sells himself initially in the story as being Mexican. And he leads them on this quest, but Lopez was the employee of the murderer.
Oh no! Twists and turns.
Yeah, there's lots of twists and turns. He was the employee of the murderer, and he was betrayed by the murderer when that group had stolen some cattle from the other one. It gets more and more complicated.
So he's got nefarious. He's not dealing a straight. He's not dealing a straight deck. He's got there is up his sleeves.
Yeah, the story, it's one of those things where the story is like an onion, and you start peeling it and peeling it and peeling it, and you get more and more and more detail about what's happened. And you also start to question, it's like, how much of a murder was what we saw in the beginning?
Right.
And was it a cold crime? Was it a crime of passion? Was it something that was done out of misdirected love? Was it, there's a lot of...
Was it... Yeah,
exactly.
Oh, spot on.
So there's a lot of questions that are asked and answered, and maybe a lot of questions that are asked, and you, the audience, get a chance to come up with your own interpretation of what these things mean. And then there's also this strange duel that goes on between Lopez chasing Shad Marone, the murderer. Is he chasing him, or is he trying to help him get away?
Yeah.
Is he chasing him, or is Lopez trying to escape from the posse himself? And
so it's a lawless land, all right, and justice is served at the sharp end of a Colt 45. In many cases, I love the fact that you've left it open to the reader to interpret so much of this. You're letting the reader have their own, I suppose, preconceptions garnered from umpteen different Western movies from The Unforgiven backwards. How hard was it to kind of play with those kind of those expectations? Because when you talk about like a Western story, you think, oh, it's going to be this. Now you're weaving in, as you say, this onion-like levels of perception. Then in fact, I would even say perception and deception. Oh, there you go. There's your tagline.
So I will say there are no mysteries in the story by the time you get to the end, but there are many different interpretations of what happened and why.
Okay.
And it's so the way you assemble something like that as a writer, luckily we never really had to do it sort of all at once. My dad did a fairly straightforward version of the story. Then as we had to expand it into a longer and longer, more detailed tale, we just took a look at other things. We decided that we wanted to start with the chase, and that the story would be told in flashbacks during the chase, and that different elements of the chase would sort of trigger those flashbacks.
Cool.
And then when we did the audio, when Kathy and I worked on the audio, it was relatively cold. The characters were sort of just trying to survive, and everything was about survival. When we went back to work on the film adaptation, one of the things that we talked about quite a bit was that we wanted it to be more emotional. And we wanted to get deeper into the emotional life of the characters and why they did these things. And it wasn't just, this is just the chess move of survival. This is something that has a core in people's feelings and their love for one another, their friendship for one another, their relationship between sort of fathers and sons and pseudo fathers and sons and neighbors and things like that. And luckily, the story just kept having more depth. Sometimes that happens especially when you can revisit something over quite a few years from, obviously my dad wrote the original story in 1945 and 46. We worked on our version our audio version in the 90s, early 90s. We worked on our movie version in the late 90s, and we worked on this well into the 2000s. And so there was lots of downtime where we could kind of think about it.
Let me ask you a question then. No, before we take a break.
Sure.
There's an audio, there's a movie, there's the original book, there's your graphic novel. Which one is the truest reflection of the story that your dad started out telling? Is it the original 12-page?
Oh, of course.
Or is it
of course.
How you've established and embellished and added more to that? Because I think seeing something at an acorn stage, and then growing into this great big tree, has got to be pretty self-fulfilling. You must feel really chuffed, really pleased about that.
So one last element before you break about that is almost always when I take something of my father's and I adapt it, and you always end up removing things, you always end up changing things. And so when I have to flesh back in detail, the thing that I like to do is go into my knowledge of his life and put things into the story that were his things that he did not put in the story.
Oh, right.
So
nice.
Like the journey that these characters take across the desert is very much almost identical to a journey that he took when he left the Fort Sumner, New Mexico area and traveled to Phoenix trying to catch up with his parents. He was walking and hitchhiking. And so his travels, trying to re-find his parents who he'd been separated from, are reflected in the journey of the posse. And there are some other things like that. Like I said, I don't think that he wrote it with as an echo of the Lincoln County War, but when he worked in the Fort Sumner area, he knew all these people who'd been involved in the Lincoln County War. So we, at no point in this entire story does anybody say anything about Billy the Kid or Lincoln County or anything like that. But at the same time, the fundamental of the conflict was based on that. So I always try to bring in these other levels of his.
So it's like life imitating art, imitating life, imitating art.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whew. Right. While you're trying to work out what I've just said, time for a break for one of our other shows. I'm having a look down our list, and I don't really have anything that's particularly cowboy-esque or western-esque even. Get my words out. However, the book is from a while ago, originally. So I suppose logically it has to be this one. Check it out. It's the Old Timers.
Do you want to find out what makes the professor do his happy dance? Check out the Old Timers Comic Book Show, only on the UCPN.
There you have it, the Old Timers Comic Book Show, where the hosts aren't old, but the comics most certainly are. Check out the most recent episode if you like everything X-Men oriented. The cartoon's doing a great show, so the guys have gone and had a look at some classics along the way. Scott Summers doesn't do well in one of them. I'm just saying that. Don't tell you anything else. Right. You've been kind enough to send us some art. So let's have a look and see what we have. There it is. Cool. This is an interesting one. When people send me art, I'm like, oh, excellent art. Let's have a look. And I open it up and it's like, what? What's this? What? Is there something wrong with my computer? What's going on wrong here? So what's this? What are we looking at?
Okay, so this is a sketch of the town Puerto de Luna, New Mexico, It's kind of it's not exactly the sketch of the actual Puerto de Luna, but the pieces that are going to appear in our story that I did for Thomas Yates, the artist, so that he could always orient himself as he was drawing his buildings and his people and everything. So he always knew where he was in town.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that we did in this book is the book has no narration. It's just pictures and dialogue. And it's about tracking. And the characters hopefully only very, very rarely say, over there, look at the big thing. They're talking about what they're seeing. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to keep very strict rules. You're seeing something and the audience sees it and we don't have to talk about it. But in order to do that, what you see has to always be very accurate and very consistent.
Okay.
And because the audience has to trust that they're seeing the thing, that it isn't just sort of some art slapped up there that doesn't exactly relate to what's going on.
So would you say that from your creative standpoint, because you worked on movies and things like this, is this kind of like your floor plan, is kind of like your stage plan of how you want the kind of key areas to be shown, right?
Yes.
So the actors don't step off in the wrong place.
If I was going to talk about doing comics in a movie sense, and there really is an enormous difference between comics and movies,
Of course.
But one of the things that I would say is that my job and Catherine's job were like screenwriters.
Right.
My job was then like a producer. Charles Santino's job was very much like a director and editor. He chose what went on the page and where. Okay. Thomas Yates' job was very much like a cinematographer and like the actors, because he's the person who played all the emotion into the faces and the postures and everything like that. And of course, he photographed, in quotes, and lit the scene. And so we kind of broke it up that way. And I like to have, when I work with people, if I can get away with it, which I can't always in movies and things like that, I like to have a fairly strict set of rules and an approach to how we're going to do things. This page that you're showing here is I think it's the third page of the comic book. And this is showing the murder that sets off the story. Cool. There's an interesting little piece here, though. You see how the outline of the page, the whole background of the page is black? Thomas did that. And then when I saw it, I thought, wait a minute, we need something to really delineate more clearly than just a label when we're in a flashback. And so I had him take out the black, and we used the black background always when we were in a flashback.
Oh, okay, cool.
So in the finished book, you don't see this black background on this page. We saved that for a completely different effect.
All right, okay. So why a comic book? Have you always been interested in comic books and graphic novels, or is this something that's a relatively new experience for yourself?
A totally new experience. I mean, when we had the chance to do it, I studied and studied and studied, and I talked with a bunch of people. I talked a lot with Charles Santino. I used to know Mike Grell, if you've heard of him.
So Mike Grell. The name does ring a bell or two. Mike Grell, for anyone who is watching and has no idea, he is probably the most well-known Green Arrow
that's correct
artist of repute from many, many years. If you want to check out his great work, you're looking for the Long Bow Hunters. And Judge Grell makes an appearance in the Arrow TV show. So there you go. Go check it out.
Yep. And Mike's a terrific guy. He taught me an awful lot about comics. And the Longbow Hunters is one of the most beautifully composed comic books I've ever seen. And the flow of information from one panel to the next, the flow of information from one page to the next is just top notch. Very, very good stuff. This page that we're looking
at, it's fantastic. Even if you're not a Green Arrow fan, go check it out because it is gorgeous.
This page that we're looking at is the following page. And if you saw the two pages together, one, as you open the book, one sits on the left, the other sits on the right, and they form a little story. One of the things that Charlie Santino was very insistent upon is that whenever possible, an open spread of pages should be a continuous sequence from the top left to the bottom right. So if you think about the previous page, it starts with Shad Marone walking up and knocking on the door. And then he shoots the guy, and the guy falls back into this chair, and he shoots him again, and then he gets on his horse and he rides off. And so spread open, this is a nice little elegant little story in 8 panels.
Cool. Like it's like a mini story, isn't it? The fact that it's setting it up, everything up from that point of view. We'll jump across to some different pages now. I'm going to try and keep it in order, but
no problem.
I know what I'm like when it comes to technology. He says doing a podcast. We'll jump ahead a little bit. We'll talk about the color scheme because on the trailer, everything is tinged with kind of like an orangey yellow kind of color that screams Western. And when I'm looking at the art here, it's black and white. Is this how the book's going to look, black and white, or is it going to have that kind of rustic look?
No, the book is black and white. The book looks pretty much like this, except these are the raw pages before the dialogue balloons got put in there before the lettering was done.
So this is an interesting point, if I may. Sorry to interject. For anyone who's looking at the pages thinking, "Oh my God, there's a lot of dead space," here, for example, and maybe up here or down there, that's space left, isn't it, for the letterers to do their thing, because you don't want the lettering to be over the character or anything like that. Correct?
That's correct. On this page, there's only lettering in the center panel, but that is the case. These pages do not have lettering or balloons or anything in them. And so this page shows a couple of different things. One, and we'll talk about it as we look at some of the other pages quite a bit, but first off, you see how the center page has got that it does not have a clear border, and it has that black surrounding it. So that indicates a moment of a flashback. This is a memory that Lopez is having, that center panel on the page.
This one here, perfect.
Yeah. Another thing that's happening here is as the story starts, Thomas and I discussed style a lot and how we were going to, and Charlie and I discussed style a lot and how we're going to do this. And one of the things that I admired the most about Apocalypse Now was how, 3/4, 4/5 of the way through, there's this wonderful scene at night with the bridge that in the daytime the Americans are building it, and at night the North Vietnamese are tearing it down. And that scene is the first place where Apocalypse Now really starts to change from kind of being realistic to surrealistic. And as they go past the bridge, everything from that point in the story has been heightened to the point where it's almost all surrealistic after that. And go ahead.
No. I was just asked, does that explain this next page then? Because some of that, there's this one with the bridge.
Yeah. So the previous page that we were looking at shows you that we're starting. I asked Thomas to start to break down the formal panel system that he was using. And so gradually, but particularly accelerating towards the end of the story, which is where we are now, he starts to sort of break it up and do these much more loose, much less formal panels, kind of thing. And so I always like, as we get to the more intense part, the more important parts of the story, to become a little more subjective in my approach. And so you can kind of see that in his composition there.
The art looks gorgeous. I'm really, really impressed at how detailed the grayscale is. You know, it's just gorgeous. How the textures of the shadows of the cliff face there, under the bridge, the shadows, how they work. I am absolutely amazed at just how gorgeous it is. It's a fantastic piece of work all the way through.
These were all the costumes, all the locations, most of the props. I pulled photographs and stuck them into a website, which I gave to the crew, and they all had examples of what period guns, of what cuffs were like, of what kind of pliers you use on a fence, all this kind of stuff. This is even, you can see in this panel, even more of a breaking down of the formal, of the kind of formal comic book approach.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that's very important in the look of this, I mean, we just lucked out in that we got Thomas to do this. And, but when I was having conversations with him very early in the process, I said, we're talking about New Mexico. This is a place where, I mean, Thomas has lived in the West also. He studied in Utah, lived in rural California. And I just said, the most important thing is that you be able to represent distance. And one of the things that he came up with was this wash, or kind of black and white watercolor effect. And what he would do once he had sketched out a panel like this, or do you have another one? Go to one more. Let's see one more.
One more. Give me 2 seconds. Do you have a particular one that you want to look at?
I think either of the last two that I gave you are probably okay for this.
Let's see what we're on now. Let me just double check which two I've got. Scene 139. Hopefully.
So it'll be,
I think it'll
be 35 or 13. Law of the Desert 35 would be a good one.
All right, bring that up then. 2 seconds. 35. There it is. Right, 2 seconds as we get all this sorted around. Very demanding, but I must admit.
Well, I hope the example will be. I hope the example will be better with this one. So he would sketch a page, yeah, and then he would start filling in. He would start filling in the black with ink on a brush. And whenever he wanted to clean his brush, he would dip it into a little pot of water. And eventually that pot started to become gray. And when he wanted to do the next level of gray, he would work from that pot, and he would dip his brush in another one, which would give him a very, very, very light gray. And this sort of ability to do kind of the deep blacks and the details in the foreground, and then let it sort of fade off so that you have this sense that you have a sense of atmosphere or bright light or something like that between you and the distance, is very important to the way this book is and the way it shows distance, and also the way it focuses your attention. There certainly are comic books that will represent almost everything in a frame at equal value. And coming out of the film world, you know, we're always very, very, very carefully pulling focus from one thing or another to direct your attention to specifically what plane we wanted at. And what he was able to do was create both a focus and a distance effect by what had heavy contrast and what had deep blacks, and then what was presented in gray. So you just basically see, especially the bottom piece, you see the distance fading off into gray really beautifully.
So I tell you what, for someone who's a film guy and not a comic guy, I think you've pretty much broken down the composition of a page particularly well. That's absolutely.
I had a lot of terrific help.
Very good indeed. We're almost coming to the end, and we haven't even touched on the websites yet. So let's have a quick look at those. There are websites. You have several. Where should we go first? We'll do this one. So lordofthedesertborn.com, Lord blog. This is a notes website, right? So if you want to find
this website was the notes for Thomas and the rest of the crew. As I said earlier, before we got Thomas, we weren't sure if we were going to be working with people who knew anything about the American West.
Mm-hmm.
And we lucked out, but I had to be prepared. And so it's a description of all of the characters. It's got photographs of the gear. It's got photographs of the locations and maps of the locations. We stuck a map in there so that Thomas would know. So if you just go through that menu, you can see different things. There's a verbal description of the different characters, but then if you go there, you'll see pictures of some of the actual places, typical costumes from the time period. And then there was also, at the end of it, we did a map, which basically allowed Thomas to know what side the sun was going to be hitting the characters from as they moved across the landscape. So there you go. We tried to make it as accurate as possible. And you can see the two paths that the characters take, one in black, one in red, on there as they chase one another.
Who's the chaser? Who is not the chaser? That's the question. Also, so we've got several others to look at. You've got lordofthedesertborn.com. Let's have a look.
That's basically our promotional site. It's got the trailer. It's got a whole bunch of reviews, which got, it was a really well received book. We were on the year's best list at the Village Voice, and we were nominated for an Eisner. And
that's impressive.
It was kind of overwhelming, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. So there you go. There's the trailer. You can watch that anytime you like. There you go. You can buy the book.
There's some buried in there. There's a couple of videos on how we did it, on how we put the story together and different aspects of it.
Perfect. Man, you've got it going on. You've gone for the whole sort of full court press regarding multimedia for sure. What else we've got? We have Louis L'Amour's Lost Treasures.
Okay, so very quickly, Louis L'Amour's Lost Treasures is a whole thing unto itself, but very quickly.
Okay.
I took quite a few of my dad's stories, about 30 of them, that I knew the backstory, sort of the story behind the story of, and I added those in postscripts to his books. We also produced 2 books of unfinished stories or unpublished stories where I tried to put them in context. So I published what we had, I published the notes, I hopefully unscrambled for the reading audience what those stories would have been like if they had been finished. And then there was an additional novel, my dad's first novel, that I jumped in and finished. That's No Traveler Returns. Mm-hmm. And that sort of fits in there. So this was all a really wonderful, it's kind of like a random access professional biography of Louis L'Amour. It basically examines his career, what his career was going to be like, and just tries to tell that story as much as possible.
And of course, you have your own website as well. Where would
Yes.
you do without that? Let's have a quick look. He says, looking for it. He has it.
Oh, wait.
There it is. I've got it. Don't worry. I'm there.
This isn't much except, it's more of a resume it's more of a resume type site than
I
anything
think it's
else.
interesting that you have this type of website because people will know of you in some shape or form, but not know where they know you from. So then I think kind of having something like this is definitely a cool kind of amendment to everything. So cool, excellent. As I said earlier, you've gone for the full court press. You've nailed it in kind of looking at the various ways you're telling the story. You've got the original, the audio, the movie. You've got the graphic, and then it's like it seems like such a work of love.
Oh, absolutely.
And I absolutely totally tip my hat. Thank you, man.
Thank
Tip
you.
my hat. You carry I guess your dad's legacy moving forward, and that must to get so many good reviews and so many great comments about it. Boy, it must make you feel absolutely, as I said earlier, on top of the world. You must feel really, really pleased and proud that your family, your mum, your dad, and you have been able to create this thing. Obviously, with some help.
Oh yeah,
yeah, fine, cool. So yeah, I always do this to people, so I apologize. I'm really, really sorry. You're near the end, so give us your 60-second elevator pitch of why people should be heading over to the website and picking up a copy of the book, please.
well, hopefully you'll really enjoy it. So
that's a good start. Yeah.
Cool. That's I mean, if you're not going to enjoy it, don't go there. Don't waste your money. But hopefully you'll really enjoy it. It is a unique book. It's very different. There are no superheroes. It is a different kind of art, and it's a different experience. But it's also a beautiful, beautiful book. I mean, as we progressed with the project, we recognized how wonderful it was. Random House recognized how wonderful it was. They gave us a bigger format, better paper, and we really tried to produce as gorgeous a book as we could possibly produce.
Cool. Thank you so much, Beau. Thank you so much for sharing it and sharing your
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time. Very much so. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
You're more than welcome. That's it for another show. Don't forget to check out all our other shows on the UCPN. You saw the trailer for it earlier. The Old Timers Comic Book Show for those that like their comics of a certain vintage. If you are a Marvel fan, don't forget to check out No Price Podcast. And for all you DC heads that are thinking, why can't we have a cool cartoon like the X-Men? You've got the comics on the Definitive Crusade. What can I say? What more do you want? But you've been an absolute star, sir. I really do appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have been your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes. And as always, adios.
Visit undercovercapes.com for the latest and greatest podcasts via the Undercover Capes Podcast Network. Also visit our parent company website, comiccrusaders.com, all about comic pop culture.